A president tried to save her life. Nigeria's highest court said no. Her children are growing up without their mother. And the man she killed, their father, is already buried. So where does that leave Maryam Sanda right now? Because here is what nobody is telling you. The Supreme Court ruling in December 2025 was not the end of this story. It was actually the beginning of the most complicated chapter yet. Today we are going to answer the question that half of Nigeria is asking and nobody has fully explained. What actually happens next? And by the end of this video, I promise you, you will understand this case in a way that most Nigerians don't. Because this is not just about Maryam Sanda anymore. This is about a question that will define Nigerian justice for the next generation. Stay with me. Let's begin with the most fundamental question. Where is she right now? Right now, Maryam Sanda is sitting in Suleja Correctional Centre in Niger State. She has been there since her conviction in January 2020. That is more than 6 years inside the same walls. She went in as a 30-year-old woman. Her children were young. And every legal option she had, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, even a presidential pardon, has now been exhausted or overturned. So what does her daily life look like? Suleja Correctional Centre is not a facility built for comfort or rehabilitation. It was designed for a population far smaller than the one it currently holds. It houses both awaiting trial inmates and convicted prisoners, sometimes in the same overcrowded spaces. Access to quality legal advice is difficult. Medical care is inconsistent. Privacy is almost non-existent. Now consider who Maryam Sanda was before November 2017. She grew up in privilege. Her father held a senior position at Aso Rock, the seat of Nigerian presidential power. She married into the Bello family, one of the most politically connected families in northern Nigeria. She lived in Maitama, one of Abuja's most exclusive districts. She had help. She had status. She had access to a world where problems were managed quietly and people like her did not end up in places like Suleja. And then one night changed everything. And now that world is gone. For a woman from that background, the psychological weight of 6 years inside Suleja, watching her children grow up through visits and phone calls, watching her legal options disappear one by one, is almost impossible to fully imagine from the outside. But here is the legal reality that most people don't understand. Having a death sentence in Nigeria is not the same as being scheduled for execution. Nigeria has not carried out a federal execution since 2016. There are currently hundreds of people sitting on death row across Nigeria's correctional facilities. Men and women who have been told by the state that they should die, but who wake up every morning still alive because the machinery of execution in Nigeria moves with extraordinary slowness. The gap between a death sentence being handed down and that sentence actually being carried out is often measured not in months, but in decades. Some inmates have spent 20, even 30 years on death row in Nigeria waiting for a conclusion that never comes in the way the court intended. So Maryam Sanda may be sentenced to die. But whether that sentence is ever carried out, and when, is a completely different question from whether it has been handed down. And it is the question her family, her lawyers, and everyone watching this case is now sitting with. Are there any legal doors that might still exist? Now here is where it gets complicated. And this is the part the news headlines are not explaining. The Supreme Court was Nigeria's final court of appeal. That door is closed. Justice Moredumain was clear. The prosecution proved the case beyond reasonable doubt, and the lower courts were right to convict. But before we accept that as the complete picture, there is one dissenting voice that matters enormously, and it has been almost completely ignored in the coverage. Justice Agim, the one judge out of 5 who disagreed, did not simply say the sentence was too harsh. He went further. He actually allowed the appeal and said Sanda's conviction should be set aside entirely. Not reduced. Set aside. He looked at the same case, the same evidence, the same record that 4 of his colleagues reviewed, and he reached the opposite conclusion. That dissenting judgment is not just a legal footnote. It is a document that tells the world, and tells any future legal team, that this case is not as clean-cut as a 4-to-1 majority might suggest. In any functioning legal system, a dissent of that magnitude keeps a conversation alive even when the official verdict is final. So what options actually remain? Option 1, another presidential pardon. President Tinubu tried once and the Supreme Court overruled him, but read the court's reasoning carefully. Their objection was specifically about timing. The Supreme Court held that it was inappropriate for the executive to grant clemency in a capital case while an appeal was still actively pending before the courts. That appeal is now concluded. There is no longer a pending case. Legally, and this is important, Tinubu or any future Nigerian president could attempt clemency again without that specific objection applying. Whether any president would dare to try after the very public humiliation of the first attempt is a political calculation, not a legal one. But the door is not legally locked. Option 2. A petition to the National Council of State. The original pardon that briefly changed everything came through this route. The National Council of State, which includes former presidents, state governors, and other senior figures, has constitutional authority in matters of clemency. It remains a pathway, and the Sanda family, with their connections, their resources, and their demonstrated willingness to fight through every available channel, has both the knowledge and the access to pursue it quietly. Option 3. International human rights intervention. This case has already attracted attention from organizations focused on women's rights, capital punishment, and the intersection of gender and justice in Africa. Amnesty International has long campaigned against Nigeria's use of the death penalty. Whether international pressure translates into meaningful change for one specific prisoner is uncertain. Nigeria does not tend to respond well to what it perceives as external interference in its judicial matters. But the attention exists, and attention, over time, has shifted outcomes in cases like this before. Option 4, and this is the one that Nigerian legal history suggests is most likely, time. Nigeria's death row is crowded, and the state's appetite for carrying out executions is demonstrably low. History suggests that many death sentences in Nigeria quietly age into something else, not through formal commutation, not through public announcement, but through institutional inertia, changing governments, and the passage of years. The state loses the urgency. New crises demand attention. And a woman on death row who causes no trouble and draws no fresh controversy gradually becomes a file in a cabinet rather than a case demanding immediate action. None of these options are guaranteed. None of them are clean, but none of them are impossible either. And that is why the December 2025 Supreme Court ruling, as definitive as it sounded, is genuinely not the end of this story. And then there are the children. This is the part of the Maryam Sanda case that nobody wants to sit with, because there is no comfortable place to land. She has children. Children who have grown up with their mother behind correctional center walls and their father in a grave in Abuja. Children who did not choose any of this. Children whose entire understanding of family, of home, of what a normal childhood looks like, has been shaped by a single night in November 2017 in a house in Maitama. Think about what that means practically. Every visit to their mother happens inside a correctional facility. Every conversation about their father happens in the shadow of how he died and who killed him. They are growing up in one of Nigeria's most elite social circles, the kind of world where everyone knows everyone, where their family name carries enormous weight, while carrying a story that no child should have to carry. The Attorney General of Nigeria, Lateef Fagbemi, cited these children specifically when defending the presidential pardon. He said the clemency was granted on compassionate grounds, in the best interest of the children. He described their mother as showing good conduct, a new lifestyle, model behavior, and remorse. The government's position was essentially this: whatever justice demands in the abstract, these specific children need their mother, and that human reality should count for something. And here is where Nigeria divided. Because the Bello family, Bilyaminu's family, also have a position on those children. Their son is dead, their nephew, their relative, and the woman who killed him was, from their perspective, being rewarded with her freedom while he remains in the ground. When the pardon was announced, the Bello family publicly called it the worst possible injustice. They did not accept it. They did not stay quiet. They went back to court, and they fought, and they won. So we have two realities sitting side by side in this case, and no legal ruling can dissolve the tension between them. On one side, children who need their mother. On the other side, a family that needs justice for their son. The Supreme Court chose justice. 4 judges to 1. And you can understand why. Courts are not built to weigh grief against grief. They are built to apply law. And the law, applied consistently, said Maryam Sanda is guilty of culpable homicide and the sentence is death. But whether that ruling was also mercy for the children, for the family, for everyone caught inside this case, is a question that no court in Nigeria or anywhere else has the tools to answer. But step back for a moment further. Because the Maryam Sanda case is not just about one woman and one marriage and one night that went irreversibly wrong. It is a mirror held up to Nigeria. And what it reflects is not always easy to look at. Think about what this single case contains. Two elite Abuja families. Political connections that run directly into Aso Rock and the PDP. A presidential pardon granted quietly as part of a list of 175 names. As if the most controversial capital case in recent Nigerian history could be resolved with the stroke of a pen while nobody was watching. A Supreme Court that had the institutional courage or the constitutional mandate, depending on your perspective, to look at a sitting president's decision and say no. A dissenting judge who looked at the same facts and reached the opposite conclusion from his four colleagues. And a Nigerian public that split completely and loudly along lines of sympathy, gender, class, religion, and politics. This case forces questions that Nigeria has been avoiding for years. Can the executive override the judiciary in Nigeria? The Supreme Court just answered that, at least in this specific instance, with this specific case, with an unambiguous no. That is not a small thing. Nigerian legal history has plenty of examples of political power bending judicial outcomes. The fact that it did not bend here, that four Supreme Court justices held the line against a presidential intervention, matters beyond this one woman's fate. Does wealth and political connection still determine outcomes in Nigerian justice? The Sanda family had every possible advantage. Elite senior advocates, political access at the highest level, a sitting president willing to use his constitutional powers on their behalf. And they still lost. That outcome, whatever you think of the verdict, is actually remarkable in the context of how justice has historically operated in Nigeria for the powerful. What does Nigeria believe about domestic violence? Because this case began as a domestic dispute, a marriage in trouble, witnesses who tried to intervene hours before the killing, a night that escalated beyond any point of return. The line between what Maryam Sanda did and what other women in desperate domestic situations in Nigeria have done, that line is not always as clear as a criminal conviction makes it appear. Women's rights organizations have been raising this since the trial began in 2018. The conversation has not gone away. And what does Nigeria truly believe about the death penalty? Nigeria retains capital punishment on its books, but it rarely carries it out, which creates a deeply uncomfortable reality. If the state sentences someone to death but almost never follows through, what is the sentence actually doing? Is it justice? Is it deterrence? Or is it a kind of permanent suspended horror, where a human being lives for years or decades in a state of official condemnation, never knowing which morning might be their last, never able to fully grieve or heal or move forward? These are not comfortable questions. They do not have clean answers. But the Maryam Sanda case forces every single one of them into the open, whether Nigeria is ready to answer them or not. So, what actually happens to Maryam Sanda now? Honestly, nobody knows. And that is not a cop-out. That is the truth, and anyone who tells you differently is performing certainty they do not have. She is on death row with no active legal appeal. The Supreme Court has spoken. The presidential pardon has been overturned. On paper, she is a woman waiting for an execution that Nigerian law says must happen. But Nigeria's own history with death row tells a different story. People wait. Years pass. Governments change. Political calculations that seemed fixed become flexible. New lawyers find new angles in old judgments. Families apply quiet pressure through quiet channels that never make the news. And the state, which moves slowly in almost everything, moves slowest of all when it comes to ending a human life. She is 37 years old. Her children are growing. And somewhere in Suleja, she wakes up every morning in a country that has officially decided she should die, but has not yet decided when. That is the reality of where this case sits today. Not dramatic, not resolved, not moving in any clear direction, just suspended. Like so many things in Nigeria that carry too much weight to move cleanly in any direction. What I can tell you with certainty is this. This case is not finished. It will resurface. Something will happen. A new petition, a new president, a new legal argument. a humanitarian campaign that finds the right moment, or the machinery of the state finally grinding toward a conclusion. When it does, this channel will be here. And we will cover it with the same depth and the same honesty we have brought to it today. Because these are the stories that matter. Not the stories that are easy. Not the stories that have comfortable endings. The ones that sit in the gray space where justice and mercy fight each other and neither one wins cleanly. These are the women the news moves past too quickly. And this is exactly why we are here. Before you leave, I want to ask you something directly. Do you think Maryam Sanda should be executed? Do you think the presidential pardon should have stood? Or do you think justice was fully and correctly served on December 12, 2025? There is no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And I genuinely want to know where Nigeria, and the world watching this, actually stands on this case. Because the comment section on this video is going to be one of the most important conversations this channel has ever had. If you are new here, this channel exists for one reason: to tell the stories of women that the world moves past too quickly. The ones who did terrible things. The ones who were failed by the system. The ones who fell through the cracks of history. Subscribe, because what is coming next on this channel is going to stop you in your tracks. And if you watched our first Maryam Sanda video, thank you. You are the reason